Askja is a large basalt-dominated central volcano in the northern volcanic zone. Glaciovolcanic deposits like Askja usually occur in and around ice-confined lakes. So what happens is they get built up over time, eventually forming steep massifs made of glassy ash and lapilli tuff deposits. You'll also notice that they're generally capped by lavas. And the reason for this is that the lavas form after the buildup breaks above sea level, meaning that the deposit either rises above the water or the water drains away from the deposit. Now, each glacial volcanic center is different. Some are predominantly fragmental, while others are completely lava-dominated, and you'll find varying combinations of these two extremes. In the case of Askja, there's a large spread of fragmental and coherent glaciovolcanic and subaerial deposits, with at least 3 calderas. There's also evidence of recent eruptions, but the main reason this area is of such interest is twofold. One, for its basaltic and rhyolitic products, and two, ice-confined evidence of eruptions. You can see these eruptions of fissure-fed micro and macro porphyritic lavas, breccias, and tuffs in Figure 2.
And this first figure shows us a regional geologic map of our study area and the footprints of the datasets used. This will be important later when it's compared with other data to produce the best fit map. And this next figure is really great at summarizing the methodology section of the report because it highlights the 4 main inputs and how these were utilized and analyzed in order to produce the best fit map. So now getting into the fieldwork of the study, we can see that they went on 2 field expeditions in 2010 and 2011. And the purpose of these were to identify dominant lithologies and to create spectral end member libraries based on these. So in order to be selected as a spectral end member, you needed to have been compositionally relevant to the evolution of the Askja massif. They needed to be abundant and continuous in their physical presence, and they needed to be previously documented in literature. So these are some photographs or examples of the lithology selected to be spectral end members. And now these samples were brought to the lab and they were studied for their reflectance spectra in the visible near infrared region. And then these were also resampled with the Aster spectral response function to produce an Aster visible and near infrared region end member library. And a similar approach was taken with the lithology samples, but in the thermal infrared region as well. So now getting into the data processing and classification process, we can see in the top left, it's just a simple visible red, green, blue image of the study area. And map B and C are both unsupervised classifications, map B being an ISO data and map C being a k-means unsupervised classification. Map D was was used to produce the best fit map because it is a supervised minimum distance classification based upon the visible and near infrared end member spectral library that we talked about a few slides ago. And a similar approach was taken with the thermal infrared data, except no figures were provided. Now getting into the thermal infrared region linear deconvolution process, on the left we can see a simple RGB thermal infrared image. And on the right, we can see the linear deconvolution output. This includes 4 end member categories as well as 1 mandatory blackbody category. And this corresponds to the number of bands in the Aster instrument. And we can see the dominant ground cover types are pillow lava and pumice. Now, in order to compile the best fit map, they used regions of interest, visible and near infrared region hyperspectral data, as well as thermal infrared region hyperspectral data, as well as the linear deconvolution results. And now these were all compared with a global digital elevation map to better define the boundaries of the lithologic units and morphological features. And by utilizing lower spatial resolution, but more lithologically diverse thermal infrared data, as well as high spatial resolution, but limited spectral resolution visible near infrared region data, they were able to reduce the drawbacks of these individual techniques and produce 2 best fit maps, one with the 1875 pumice distribution and one with that pumice removed.
All right, so now we're going to look at the results. So firstly, the researchers described the results of the best fit map, and this was done with the Askja data. Using this data, they were able to find 6 primary cover types. They are the subaerial lava, the sander deposits, the glaciovolcanic deposits, the pumice, the water bodies, and the vegetation. The subaerial lava, the sander deposits, and the glaciovolcanic deposits consisted of the majority. And 2 of these units were able to be further subdivided. So the subaerial lava and the glaciovolcanic deposits, they were able to be further subdivided based on their textural subunits and their geomorphic distinctions. So basically the texture of the stones or the rock and the morphology of those stones. Now we will look at the further subdivisions of the 2 classes. So for the subaerial lava, there's the Aha lava, there's the shield volcano units, there is the undifferentiated Holocene lava, and the emergent glaciovolcanic subunits. And for the glaciovolcanic deposits, we have the fragmental units, we have the coherent dominated subgroups, and we have the porphylectic units. So now we have one of the best fit maps here. Showed this one because it shows the original pumice and then how it was further subdivided using these new techniques or looking at applying the morphology and the texture involved in the classification. But we can really see the layers and how they overlap and the distinctions that the classifications were able to use together to further subdivide the units. So now we can look at the techniques that were used to identify the features. So there's 2 overarching classes of types. There was the visible, which is vis, and the thermal infrared, which is the term. And from there was 4 tests done for each of those overarching classifications. And you can see which ones correspond to which types of rocks and how they intermix together to confirm the classifications. There's also water and vegetation. But from the chart, it further shows, how using a mixture of the techniques, the researchers were able to compare the results of these varying tests and use the common results to confirm classifications, and they were able to work in conjunction to classify varying stone types. So now we'll go on to the discussion. So firstly, the researchers found that the best fit map served as a useful tool because it increased the aerial map of the volcanic zone. It was able to separate 2 new rock types from the others. It was able to revise data on the distribution of volcanic rocks in the area, and the map introduced new ground cover types. Additionally, the map was found to be successful in testing the application of remote sensing of glaciovolcanic terrain. And lastly, the study was able to identify more differences in volcanic stone types than in the past from the use of their composition, their morphology, and their texture, which is, I think, the main takeaway from this.
The success of this study speaks to the potential for remote mapping of glaciovolcanic areas, while the shortcomings of existing regional maps, paired with the variability of glaciovolcanic massifs surrounding Askja, beg for further field investigation. The techniques employed in this study identified 2 textural glaciovolcanic deposit types. They also helped identify coherent lava facies, enabling more effective dating techniques for volcanic rocks and more accurate ice thickness records. Apart from validating remote sensing data, this study shed light on the potential of supplementing field-based mapping while providing yet another example of integrated ASTER VNIR and TIR data for compositional mapping of volcanic regions around the globe.